The following podcast is part of the MindBodySpirit.fm podcast network.
Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
Okay, I picked up a deck of cards.
A new one?
Well, this one's kind of new. This is we haven't had this before, but this I figured we're gonna go woo. We might as well go all the way. So
I
this
like
is
it.
the Seasons of the Witch, and it's so cute. Like I'm telling you, it's cute. And the card I picked was Angelica. Is that right?
Uh-huh.
Angelica. And it says, "The bells have rung, chiming far and near. Underneath feathered wings, my dear, you have nothing to fear." It's a little poem. Isn't that sweet? But look how sweet. It's like there's
That's
like the little angel flying up above. And make sure you get on the Wholeness Network and see this if you're just listening. See that video version in the library. But I think that's so sweet. Like, there's just nothing to fear. And I love that as we start this woo video, our first woo of the year video.
Yes. Our woo-woo book talk.
Our woo book talk. When Shalene said this idea, she's like, I think, what if we talk about the woo of this book? Because there's a lot in there. And I said, I think we got to do it every month. So I cannot be more excited about this episode each month.
Yeah, it's really fun to think about the woo aspects to some of this that some people who don't think that they like woo probably do more than they say they do. So let's talk about our definitions of woo. Maybe it is even different for you and I, but yeah, what's your definition of woo?
Well, I tell you what, it gets less woo over time. But my old self would have been, I remember my brother-in-law having a handful of crystals once, and I just thought, roll my eyes, so anything metaphysical was woo-woo for me. Anything that was outside of what my belief system said was considered woo-woo,
Yeah.
So anything that was, I wasn't even much of a mindset person even back then, my old self. It was just I was more of do what I'm supposed to do, girl. That was me.
I can see that. So when we talk about woo, Michelle and I joke that there's like the woo, and then there's the woo-woo, and then there's like the world of woo. So I would say, I guess never say never. The world of woo, I feel like I don't usually go there, but maybe I'm there to some people.
Yeah,
So,
right. It's relative.
Yeah. So the world of woo, I guess to me would be when you're throwing away everything conventional,
Yes.
going to like everything non-conventional is what I would say in my mind. But I guess conventional can even be debated. So
Right. The story is, so I was with a friend and we were at a crystal shop, and it was maybe like the third time I had been to a crystal shop, like it wasn't like I totally knew my way around. Maybe it was a little more, but I was kind of woo at that point.
Okay.
But we were in this crystal shop, and this guy comes in and he's like, I'm gonna need this and this. I've got to go fight Poseidon, and me and her kind of look at each other, and we get in the car. We're like, if I ever tell you I've got to go fight Poseidon, like that's when you'll know that I've gone over the edge. And then I'm not kidding you. Like we're a block and a half down the road, and we're like, well, I don't know what he's talking about. It's like, I don't even know what that means. And it was just funny that after, like, we were both like, on second thought, I don't know what that means. Maybe I would understand if he explained it to me. You know what I mean? It was just, we just had to, I just was so broken open. It was like, I literally I don't know what's up and what's down. So who knows? You know what I mean? Like that doesn't resonate with me right now, but it can resonate with him. And like I said in our Sunday, we did our little Sunday reset, and we talked about what we were going to say here. And I said, I want to just, for me, woo-woo is just open to all the possibilities for me, because I was so in a box, right? I was boxed for myself, my own self. Like I don't, anybody else didn't have to put me there. I put myself there all by myself.
Right.
And the possibilities, I mean, and so again, it's not about measurement, better or worse. It's just possibilities. Like they are all there. And some of them I don't want to, like some things I don't care to entertain. But that's a little different than I'm afraid of it or I've judged it or I'm uncomfortable with it. If I had those feelings inside me, I would suggest to myself, a little work. I don't have to go down that path. I just have to, not have, I just have to say that's just not it's more about knowing what does fit for me rather than blocking stuff because I don't, for those other reasons, for fear, those kind of things.
Yeah, the word uncomfortable is a little bit, I think, a word that I like to look at a little bit because I think about, yeah, my childhood. And I think if some people looked at maybe some of the religious traditions that I did as a kid, they would be like, no,
Right.
that is super weird. But to me, that was like normal, right? I grew up with it. It was expected. It was normalized, whatever. And
Yeah.
so looking at some of these other things, like say crystal, I'm like, oh, that makes me really uncomfortable because it's outside of what I've known before.
Right.
And so, maybe, and you've said this before, sometimes you'll look at something and be like, I will never do that. That is so weird. And then you look at yourself 3 years down the road, you're like, oh, here I am.
Too much. I know I've done that so much. I gotta learn.
Right.
I mean, I had to learn, and that's why it was like, if I want to learn what Poseidon is, I should have a judgment on it. So I'm not going to have a judgment. I don't know
Yeah.
what he's been through. I don't know what that symbolizes for him. I don't know what that means. Therefore, I don't, you know what? I'm gonna not judge it. I'm not gonna judge it.
So,
So
yeah. And I think woo, and especially for our talk today, we're talking about some psychological, um, psychological therapies,
yeah,
maybe,
yeah,
or
yeah. I mean, he is a
just
therapist, PhD
right.
in therapy. Yeah.
And so you could look at it as, okay, this is a science. And I
Hmm.
think there's a lot of things, in science that we look at very beginning and be like, what is this? Like I think of that with EMDR. It is so widely accepted, but I have to believe that when it first came out, people are like, what? I'm going to move
Right.
my eyes and deal with trauma, you know? So I think some of those things they move out of the woo and into the normal sometimes. And there's that fluid spectrum, I guess. I don't know if it's a
Yep.
spectrum, but yeah, so I think it'll be fun to talk about the woo and my goal, I guess, and maybe Michelle, you might have a different goal, is to kind of talk about some of those things that maybe we can't explain but we feel are true
Yeah.
in the
And that's,
book.
yeah, that's fair. I love that. I love that idea. And talking about the stuff you can't explain. I mean, when we get into Einstein stuff, I'm going to tell you some things that does not make sense in our
Actually,
world today. Like it doesn't. So hold on, because I mean, this is if we want to get into real science, it's crazy sometimes. Like it's crazy. It's
yeah.
crazy. But
Okay.
where did we start? Where do we start with the woo in
I
the
think we're
big
going to
woo?
start with the questions that he
Yeah.
asks in the first chapter. So I'll just kind of go over those. And Michelle was saying, like, when she first read it, it was like you call it the big gulp.
Yeah, yeah, the big gulp.
Like,
Yeah, you're like, I know what I know what an upper limit is. Ding.
yeah, right. So he asked 4 questions. So he wanted to say, how can I extend the periods of contentment in my life? And then if I can eliminate the behaviors that stop the flow of positive energy, how can I feel great all the time?
Yeah.
Can I allow things to go well in my life all the time? In relationships, can I live in harmony and intimacy all the time? And can our species live in expanding ways of peace and prosperity, free from the pattern of messing things up when they are going well?
Mm, right.
And I think, oh, yeah, that makes me
Yeah.
go. That makes me go for myself. That makes me go for society when things start to go really well. I
Hmm.
mean, one that's kind of obvious is like the 2008 stock market crash. Things were going really well. Banks were very open, allowing people to invest, and then crashed because
Hmm.
people, I don't necessarily know if we could say people are to blame or who we want to blame in that situation, but the upper limit was there and we hit
Hmm.
it.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good example. Yeah. Yeah. And that idea of that upper limit, which is one of the huge takeaways from that book is just, how would you describe that upper limit? Let's just go there. I think we might have talked about it in the intro, but let's
Yeah.
talk about it.
Yeah. I think the upper limit to me is in my brain or subconscious. idea of where I belong or where I can get to this point, and that's just about as good as I can get. And if I get better than that, I don't know what that looks like. I'm comfortable with it. And so I don't know how much is conscious. And some of it
Mhm.
I think is given to us through our parents, like three generations of like, this is who we are.
Totally, totally.
And and I think you have a little bit of a better definition for that. But yeah, will you tell me your definition?
Of of the upper
The upper
limit.
limit? Yeah.
Well, they talk about it's kind of like a thermostat. It's like it's our comfort zone. It's really like our comfort zone of what how great we can be, right? We have this limit of how great we can be. And I think it is a lot subconscious and I think it is a lot transferred through generations just by I mean, it doesn't even have to be woo-woo. It's like just how we think about ourselves. For instance, one of the things I had to think about that came up for me in this month of the big leap is I remember one time walking down the street and I had these friends. I had these friends that lived, across the street. They were my friends I'd go to and that's who I'd play Barbies with. They were my friends. And um their dad had the same job as my dad. They were both pharmacists, you know.
Wow.
But clearly and they were living she had much cuter clothes and I really liked her clogs and she had nicer Barbies. It's like clearly there was an economic difference between us. And I remember I was on a little walk or something with my mom and I was telling her about this. And I was kind of like, yeah, mom. In my mind, I was like, yeah, mom, like they have better than this and I wish I had this and da 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 da. Well, whatever I was saying, obviously triggered some things in my mom. So her answer was, well, why don't we go live somewhere where people are poorer and then we can be the rich ones? So she bit back.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
knew immediately, like, don't talk about that again. That was one of those moments. And I had to go back in time and kind of see that in a different perspective and see that moment and say, like, because it's been a memory that just kind of pops up, you know what I mean? But I'm like, oh, it's been popping up for a reason for a long time because something happened there, like something happened there. First, I think I was a very, very much I was put into like a hierarchical, like those people were above us. We were above these people, like it
Well,
put
so is
that
your
into
mom,
my,
obviously.
obviously, right? Obviously. And I took that on at that point. And so I had to go back and talk to that, younger version of myself and say, what do you need here? And she's like, I just wanted to tell about my stuff. Like, what would have happened if my mom said to me, that would be, that would have been, wouldn't that be great if we could get, that sounds awesome. All those things, those sound amazing. I know you and I know those are possible for you.
Well,
The
even that, but I was thinking like even from a state of curiosity, being like, yeah, I'm curious why that is that way too. Like, yeah, we're
right.
really similar. I wonder
Yeah.
why.
Yep. And I knew that like at that moment, I mean, you know, if she had reacted a little differently in that moment, I know I would be different today. I mean, it was impactful. It was
Wow.
impactful. If that I just because I could go through the whole thing, but I was just like, yeah, I made that was an impactful moment for me. It programmed into my system some things that I needed to unprogram, right? Like I needed to get them out.
Mm. The
So
programming, that's an interesting idea. I like that. That yeah, the upper limit is programmed.
yeah, it's programmed in. And that's why it's subconscious almost because it's just running in the system. It's kind of
Mm.
like, it's like if my husband does code and you put this stuff in the code and the computer isn't necessarily intelligent, it's running the code,
Right.
it's running the system. It's like is my hair color intelligent or is it just running the code? Well, mine is not. Spoiler alert. No, I'm just kidding. Bad example, but comical. But you know what
Yes.
I mean? Yeah, my eye color, whatever, like it's programmed in. There's not
Hmm.
necessarily a decision to make. It's programmed in. And sometimes our thoughts and beliefs are that way. And this book is just that opportunity to think of the possibility of unraveling some of that programming and putting in new data, you know?
And I think seeing the programming, allowing yourself maybe to see where it's at. Because, recently Michelle and I both kind of got a little bit sick. Well,
Yep.
she got a lot sick. I got a little bit sick. And I was thinking to myself, because he says that in the book, like your body is going to get sick when you start reaching your upper limit. And I'm like, that cannot be proved by science. You cannot tell me my
Right.
doctor is going to agree with me if I go to them and say like, hey, I got sick because my upper limit. They'd be like, no, it was a virus. You know what I
Right,
mean?
right, 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 right.
But I can look at some key points when I've gotten sick, just recently since I've kind of known about this, that oh yeah, starts going really good with my partner and I get sick or
Hmm.
something like that. And it's okay.
It
And
happens.
now what do I do? Now what? Now how do I move that upper limit a little bit higher? Or yeah, what do I do
Yeah.
next?
Yeah, I talked about it in our intro, when my voice went out, when I got sick and my lost my voice. It's like it happens. It's real. And I really like appreciate Gay Hendricks calling it out and just
Yeah,
being real about it. Like it's to me, he kind of made it a little less woo. It's like,
exactly. Yes, exactly. He made it less woo, but to me still, like I can't prove it. It is woo.
yeah. Well, in the book, he says a quote. He says, each of us has an inner thermostat setting that determines how much love, success, and creativity we allow ourselves to enjoy. And
Wow.
and I think, I mean, to me, I don't know if about you, but you do. You feel that that's true. It feels true inside. And I think so if we think about that, we have this inner thermostat. Well, where is that thermostat set? Then we go into so I tried to make a list and help me fill out this list, but it was like we might look to alter that thermostat with maybe we look at false beliefs. Maybe we call it getting rid of stuck energy. Maybe we call it having an emotional block. Maybe we call it having bad or negative energy. Maybe we call it a curse, Maybe we call it energetic attachments or cords. Maybe we call it bad luck. Maybe we call it a soul contract. Maybe we call it generational trauma or issues. Maybe we call it karma. So whatever we call it, then we go into that direction. Whatever we want to do, we go into that direction and we're going to work on that aspect of it. We're going to call it that. We're going to work on that aspect. And it all just channels up to this upper limit. You know what I mean? Like some people
Right.
might say, "Oh, I've got this cord attached." Okay, let's go work on the cord. You know, well, I just got this stuck energy. Okay, let's do some stuck energy stuff. Like you're going to go into the woo to work on that upper limit. It's going to call if it's going to be called some of these different things. We could even go into the modalities. You know what I mean? Like maybe you're going to choose this modality to work on that upper limit. Maybe you're going to choose this modality to work on the upper limit. And so, but it's like it really quickly moves into this woo-woo world because there's not a shot for it. There's not a medication for it. There's not an
Mm-mm.
exercise for it for your physical, that's going to do these things. Like these are unseen. These are felt things. These are things they're not seen. And
These are things
so,
insurance isn't going to pay for, basically.
correct. That's a good point. That's a good point. Um, Yet, let's say the
Yeah.
possibilities are
Oh,
there.
can you imagine being able to like right off your foot zone? Or your,
Right?
massages are kind of getting there, which I
They
think are
are.
cool. So there's
Well,
room.
even chiropractors are considered a modality of energy medicine, and they are covered by insurances now.
Right.
So who knows? Who knows? In fact, you know me, when Amazon was coming out with their medical plan, and I don't know if it was just for their employees or what, but it was kind of this quick news I saw, and I quickly wrote a message on LinkedIn to the person to like whoever I could find that was and like, please, would you consider putting like energy medicines or energy therapies into your health program? And I got a
Wow.
response. It was like, send an email to this person. So I did. Never heard anything
Good
back,
for you.
but
Good for you.
it's possible. It's possible. But yeah, like those are the words. Those are the things. And maybe there's more that you can even think of. Maybe people go and get their star chart done and they say, okay, what's going on for me? What is my purpose? Where am I at? But we're going to look at some of these. This is what's so valuable about these woo-woo things is they give a name for what we're feeling or
Yeah.
and I think I trust that people kind of intuitively know, like, I've got some stuck in. I just feel like I'm stuck, or they'll say, I don't know. I just feel like this person's draining me or something like that, and let's work on those. Like that's where we work on those things to get past this upper limit. That's the work we're in.
Yeah. And sometimes I think people try something and feel that something has changed, and then they
Hmm.
are like, that's that gateway.
Yes.
Whatever it is, someone says like, "Oh, just try this." Like I think my in-laws are in their 70s, and I'd been talking about foot zoning for years, and they're like, "No, hard pass." And then a family member decided to do it and offered to give them one for free, and now they're like, "Oh yeah, I actually really like that now." I was like, "Yeah, I know."
Right.
So it's like just
It's lonely at
you
the
know,
front
just
of the
experience.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, being open to experiencing different things sometimes can really open up those modalities to you. Then you get to start looking at your upper limit problems, raising that temperature gauge, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I'm excited to keep raising it higher and
Yeah.
higher.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I remember doing an exercise with Carol Tuttle with moving up the chakras. And I was in the middle of feeling it and I could not deny it. I felt better at the end. Like I was like, I feel I feel better. And that's when I'm like, okay, we're moving forward because like if somebody said, what do you want to feel better? Like that was as simple as like that was the simplest terms. Like I just want to feel better.
And good for you for leaning into it. I think some people might get scared from that because they don't have
Yeah.
a name for it or whatever,
And it was scary. It was, I mean, it was a laying down, laying on the altar my all my insecurities because it for a minute, it was scary because the reason why, and here's the thing, it took a while to get here, but because I was afraid of being alone. That was the fear. It wasn't the fear of the thing. It wasn't the fear of chakras.
Okay.
It wasn't the fear of learning the chakras. It was the fear of being alone. Other people weren't on this journey. And so I needed to do it on my own. I needed to do it on my own. I wanted the security of everybody else to say, "Oh, I love it." Like you with your in-laws. It's like, "Oh, I love it." Like it's hard to be rejected and have them pull back. That's
Right.
painful. I don't care
And
who you are.
I think that is definitely the pathway of someone who gets into woo because not everyone, I think I've noticed that is that as I've gone more into woo, then all of a sudden I can see the people that I've known that have been doing this for a really long time and people that just want to stay back here and it's
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And that's why like people that add a little woo to their lives, I have, it's really easy for me to open my heart to them a little bigger because when you get to woo, everything else has failed you pretty much. You know what I mean? You've gone through some some wilderness time. Like I can guarantee that you've done some hard work and it's been difficult. And I talk about that when I interviewed Linda, we talked a little bit about or in our When Help Hurts episode
Mhm.
because it's like um we you usually people have usually come and so we need to teach as wellness practitioners, to help people tap into their own intuition because they've been given every answer under the book, like in the book, try this, try that. And sometimes woo-woo people are just another one of those people. Try this.
Hmm.
And that's not, they're not trying to be hurtful, but it's like that we need to go, what does the person needs to be involved in their own healing, what feels right. So if you have if like any of those words I said had like just a little ping inside you, follow it, accept, if you're like, oh, I just did, if I said bad or negative energy and you just kind of went, okay, let's go there. Let's do some clearings with an intention to get rid of negative energy.
And the awesome thing is that you don't have to be alone. You have the Wholeness Network. I know that sounds really corny,
Yeah.
but you have at least two physical beings cheering
Yes.
you on and a whole field of experts that are right there with you.
Yes. Yes. 100%. 100%. Another quote that I really loved in the book was the real trap of the upper limit problem is not just that it limits you, but that it makes you believe that the limit is real. And here's the thing in Katie Hendricks' podcast, I thought it was really interesting because she talked about how she had to do that with her own husband because he had his PhD from Stanford.
Mhm.
And when she told us where her PhD from, it was like, you hadn't really heard of it too much. So automatically, she was to her, she was going to categorize that as Stanford is better than hers, right? But that's an upper limit issue because that doesn't make her any less of a person. And I really, really admired that she did that work on her own to say, look, that's because that feels real, right? It feels real that Stanford is better than some other college.
I don't like it, but yeah, it does.
Right. It feels real. But does that mean he's a better person? Does that mean he has access to more information? Does that mean he is more powerful than her? No. And so she dared to stand in that place and say, I'm going to, that isn't going to be part of my upper limit. Like she let that go. And it was just a big moment for me to kind of hear her say that because it's like, yeah, if you can do that, maybe I can do that
Mhm.
because I would be right there with her, I'd be right there with her.
I mean, there's so many ways we can categorize ourselves and rank ourselves among anybody. But yeah,
Yes.
to say that I'm not gonna put that. That's kind of that idea when we're gonna talk about like the oneness idea.
Yes.
Take away that.
Yes. Okay, just another one last quote about the upper limit problem. And we talked about this a little bit, is the upper limit problem has a sneaky way of showing up in the form of worry, criticism, or even illness, which we talked about. I think that's interesting because think about just the worry and criticism part. So it's like worries, like to me, it's where I go in and it's like, what am I going to do? Oh my gosh, that's like inward facing, or criticism's like they can't help, that kind of a thing. Um, and then of course we talked about the illness, but isn't that interesting to think about that, to just think about worry and criticism as, this upper limit. And I feel like when we interviewed him, there was no judgment on the upper limit. It was just, hey, there's more,
Yeah.
hey, there's something more. And you're invited and you're worthy of it now.
I was just thinking like we expect life to be like this teeter-totter. And if someone's doing better than us, then that's how it's got to be. But if we're going to do better than them, we're afraid because we don't want that person to go down. But
Right.
really, it's like this. We're all going to be able to get to well, maybe like that. We
Yeah.
all have room at the top.
I love
And,
that idea.
and yeah, we don't have to hide our light because we're worried someone else's light has to dim for us to be bright. Like all of us can shine.
Yep. Well, I mean, since we were young, I mean, it's not fair. Like, it's not fair. And fairness is like, it's the opposite of abundance. It's like it feels good to have something be fair, but it's not abundance. It is
You're
not
right.
abundance. And so be careful of wanting fairness. I mean, there's, and I'm not saying fair, when there's injustice, 100%. You know what I mean? Like, there's injustice that can happen. But but sometimes it's like, I don't know, at least the direction I'm coming from as I see it is it's like, well, I got to get my piece of the pie. And well, you know what? There's pie for everyone. Everyone gets a whole pie. Like,
Oh yeah.
we don't need to divide it. There's enough pie, and you can have as many pies as you want. Like that's the abundance versus fairness. You're going to cut those pieces, and everybody gets a share of one
There's a
whole.
finite amount.
There's a finite amount. Well, the other kind of major theme in the Big Leap is the zone of genius. This
Yes.
idea of the zone of genius. And one of the things a quote I loved from the book is genius is not something you're born with. It's something you discover,
Wow.
which to me thinks it's like in a circle because that means you're born with it.
I
But you
know.
have to discover it. You know what I mean? Like it's one of
Chicken and
those
egg things.
yeah, the chicken and egg things. Yeah. Um, and I loved how going back to the upper limit, I loved in the episode how we said, I asked him, how can we raise somebody without an upper limit? And he's like, I don't know. And so it made me feel like maybe there is something. I thought about it because I'm like, one of the most amazing accomplishments in the world is overcoming something. If we didn't have any challenges, would we have some of these triumphant moments that are some of our favorite moments, and maybe the ultimate moment is ourselves, you know what I mean, is to overcome ourselves and to overcome the insecurities or the wondering if we're enoughness, the hustling.
Mm.
How could you imagine the triumphant feeling that would be to get like that's a journey. Like that's what I call a journey. Like if I could send my kid on that journey, at the end of this journey, you're going to feel, you're going to know your greatness. Like I'd say go, and I'd be cheering him on no matter how hard it was, because I know at the end, there you go.
Isn't that the hero's journey?
Yeah, totally.
Like as as cliche as it is, like you look at Star Wars and that was Luke
Mhm.
Skywalker's whole job was trying to get rid of his upper limit, right?
Yes, that's a good point. Yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. And they showed him how to swing his weapon, and they showed him how to stand, but that wasn't what they were trying to teach him.
Mm-mm, they weren't.
No, no.
It was
And
that inner work, the inner work.
the inner work, yeah. And they call it the force, but they knew the force is in you. Like you're part of it. It's back. This is the oneness. We're going into the oneness, but totally, totally. Also, he says your zone of genius is not just what you do, it's how you express your unique self in the world. I think this is hugely important.
I know, but it's like it feels like a big mountain to climb for me sometimes because I can find little pieces, but and maybe because I'm currently on this journey to find
Yeah.
what it is. It's like it feels exciting and also overwhelming.
Well, I think it's like if you were to tell like let's see, what grade did you work with when you were teaching?
I 3-year-olds.
Okay, I thought so. So young. So perfect. What, how many of those 3-year-olds did you have to say, um, were expressing their unique self? Like, were they trying to be like everyone else? Yeah. No, they were only expressing themselves, to the fact, like, they didn't know how to not. And
Mm,
it's like, I want that. He hit me. Like they have no those filters on. Well, those filters are like in IFS protectors.
yeah,
But we were there once. It's possible to get there again. It's the judgment that says we're not supposed to be what? Like, and that all of those whats are the upper limit. I'm not supposed to be what? You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
I shouldn't hope for that. I shouldn't want that. Um, yeah. One of the in my star chart, two things in my star chart, and I don't know if I've said this before, but I remember her saying like the closer you were born to noon, I'm telling you, upper limit, say this out loud. But it's like the more you want to be seen in the world, like you want people to see you, like
Oh,
you want to
wow.
be seen. I was born at 11:49 a.m.
I was born at 1:49 a.m.
Okay,
So
okay.
I don't want to be seen, I guess.
Maybe, maybe. But I was when she said that, I'm like, what? Like, and that like hit me like, no, you're not supposed to do that. You
You're
know what
not
I mean?
supposed to.
Like, yeah, I'm
Mhm.
like, not supposed to want that. No. And, I mean, it still is uncomfortable for me, obviously, but that was a moment of like, that's a thing, like, I mean, here I am pushing against this thing. And it doesn't mean that I'm like, I want to be seen. It just kind of was like, it just gave me, something to bump up against to feel those upper limits, right? To
Mhm.
feel that. It was like, if she hadn't said anything, I probably wouldn't have known, but she said that. And I was like, what? What? And then in my Enneagram, I am a two, but I'm more of a three wing, and that's a three wing wants to be seen, and I'm like, no, no there, and I'm like, so
Wow.
what was that? That's probably some false beliefs going on. That's probably some generational trauma or issues going on,
So are those barriers as well to finding your zone of genius as far as like not like finding something that you're good at, but feeling ashamed for it or something?
Well, I think you were almost going to say it's like when we talked about we made it like a reel about it. It's like what is it? Anything that you're uncomfortable with about yourself or anything that you're uncomfortable with just means there's something about yourself you haven't learned to love yet. Is that right? There's like we put a reel out. It was in that episode. But I mean, I think that's part of it. It's like really it comes down to I mean, to me, if I do the, thought experiments, it's like, okay, let's say I I don't like my job and I hate my job and it's bothering me and I'm ornery when I get home. You know what I mean? Like that's a everyday kind of a thing. That's a normal thing that it would feel really true that my job's the problem. It'd feel really true that I have a headache because of my job. I mean, going back to that quote, um, it it's it makes you feel like that limit is real. Like that feels real, you know what I mean? But it's like what's stopping me? What's when you explore what is happening in my work. And I think too, we talked about I think there could be it could be a harmony issue, you know. Well, that's going to be okay, I got to realize that my note doesn't match her note. We're not in harmony. And I'm okay with it. I don't need to change myself, and she doesn't need to change herself. We're just not a match. Like it
Hmm.
doesn't mean we have to come into harmony with those people. It's just, oh, I kind of don't get along with that person. I don't need to fix me. I don't need to fix them. Um, and then I can love about myself that I'm different than her. And then that feeling kind of goes away. Does that make sense? So I mean there's other practical things that we could talk about, but really things boil down to, I mean that's what IFS is. The first question is like, and how do you feel toward that? And most of the time it's like, I don't like it.
Hmm.
Right. Right. That's why there's always more than one part that shows up because there's a part doing it and there's a part that doesn't like that. And that's where we get a little stressed. That gets a little messy in there. And
Yeah.
so we just let them speak and they speak. Um, and he talks about, but yeah, your unique self. Like to me, I feel like the most of the journey is just allowing the journey to moving to your zone of genius is letting go of all that is not you. It's more of letting go of what is not. And what you are not is you are not dumb. You are not lazy. You are not, and to get to that place where that feels true in the body, to me, that's healing. That's not work. That's healing that gets done.
So you're not necessarily when you're like talking about letting go of things, it's letting go of beliefs about yourself, not letting go of things that are in your zone of incompetence. Or you
Right,
doing
right. I think that's probably part of it too. But yeah, those beliefs, I think because to me, when I read his book, I feel like that's what he's trying to get to is it's like when you are in this state of living in this way, that is your reality.
Hmm.
What breaks you out of the reality? You know, what breaks you out of the reality? Like we talked about in that show, we've talked about it before in the show Somewhere in Time, he is
Okay.
in this alternate reality. It's true, true and true and true until he pulls out that penny and it says 1976 or whatever. And then now his brain is trying to put two realities together and it doesn't match up, and the left brain comes in and categorizes and says, you don't belong here, blah, 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 and he's back. Um, and and so what are those pennies? What are the things that pull us out of that unique self, you
Hmm.
know? And look at those and be like, okay, Penny, what do you got to tell me? Like because he could, I mean, this is kind of strange, but there's that penny. Yes, I was from 1976, but I'm here now. This is real. This was what's really real. But that
Yeah.
belief took him out of it. The reality was there.
Right.
I'm right in front of his face. But the the belief and all the context the programming, no, you shouldn't be here. You're from 19, that's what actually caused the problem. The
That's
penny
really
wasn't
profound.
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's profound. Thank you.
Yeah. Um, and he talks about leaping into the unknown. And I loved how he said on our podcast, about wonder. How do you leap into the unknown? You open up the possibilities like you did in our session in our Sunday reset was so good, where you open up the possibilities. It's so empowering. It feels so good to open up the possibilities and just let them be.
Yeah,
Let them be.
I agree. I like that too. Whenever I wouldn't say whenever, but just recently I've just started to just wonder, like when I have something that hurts. I would
Mm.
say recently when something hurts, and I would say, I wonder what it would be to have solved this problem, or I wonder what it would be to like have a really good experience doing this, or something like that. And it does take me to a different place than just, I mean, I'm trying to feel my feelings too, but
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it's a fine line sometimes, you
yeah,
know.
but just, yeah, I wonder what it would be like to not have the experience the same way again, I guess.
Right. Yeah, yeah, or like, yeah, I wonder what this would feel like. I think that's a perfect exercise to do because that's the thing, the difference between I wonder versus this cannot be happening. You know what I mean? Those are
Mhm.
totally two different frequencies to me. Those feel very different.
Yes.
And that's why wonder is so powerful because it's like, I wonder what that would feel like. I wonder what that would feel like. Okay, well, the one thing that we can for sure gets into the woo-woo of the big leap is this thing called Einstein time,
Oh yeah. I've
which is
listened to that.
ironic.
I know. I've listened to that session or that, not that section. I've listened to that section of book probably 5 times, trying to just really understand it because it's not out there, but it is for my brain.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy. It's very out there, and yet it's rooted in science. So we're going to talk a little bit about Einstein, like why he called it Einstein time, I'm sure, is because, okay, Einstein had this thing called the theory of relativity. And again, we've talked about he was a patent clerk. He would take inventions and look at them and see if they were real and see if somebody else had done it. I don't know what he was doing.
I had no idea
Oh,
that
did you? Yeah.
that no. Thank
Yeah.
you for telling me that.
Yeah, so he would just sit in an office. He sat in an office, like think of the government agencies, and he's just sitting there doing his job, and he would just wonder about the universe. And one of the questions he had from when he was a kid was, what would happen if I was going at the speed of light? Like, what would light look like? And that was just kind of one of those questions that he always wondered about. I'm like, well, you're in another age of wonder.
Yeah, really.
Um, but if I so let's think so this is the fascinating thing. So let me give you an example. So let's say if somebody was standing still and a car went 100 miles an hour past them, it would go by pretty quickly, right?
Mhm.
If I was going 50 miles an hour and a car passed me going 100 miles an hour, they would appear to be going faster, but not the same as the person standing still.
Okay.
And so if you can think about that, like time is a little bit relative to
Okay.
our location, to what's happening to us. And that's
Oh,
so strange, but it's even weirder than that because I asked ChatGPT to describe the theory of relativity very simply. Help me.
okay.
And this is what it said. It said a few of the things. It said number one. Now this is a scientific thing. Time isn't fixed. That sounds crazy. There's only 24 hours in a day, is what we're programmed to believe. But the science is time isn't fixed.
Hmm.
Time doesn't tick the same everywhere. How fast or slow it passes it depends on how fast you're moving or how strong of gravity you are. So they've literally done experiments where they've put a atomic clock, which is it like seconds, milliseconds, whatever, clear down, you know what I mean, on at sea level and up into the mountains. They just put the clocks there. Like this blows your mind.
Yes,
And
it
then when
does.
they brought them back together, their timing was a little off. They weren't the same. I don't know how the clocks understood it. It makes no sense to me. Guess what it is? It's complete woo-woo. That's
That
what it
is
is.
woo. Amen.
But this is real life science. This is real life science. Um, and the other part about relativity, that the theory of relativity is that moving faster slows time down, which I think is interesting because it's true. Like if I'm busy doing, if you're busy, you can get so much more done. It's like time kind of slows down and you get a lot more done if you're moving fast, even in your whole life. Like that's one way to think about it. But they're talking about, bigger
But
times.
also, Michelle, I notice sometimes when I'm being watched, I can't do things as fast.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, as when I'm learning stuff at work, someone's standing behind me yeah, that, so it's relative. It's
It's
relative is what you're
it's
saying.
relative. That's why they call it that. The other big thing about the theory of relativity is that time and space are connected. And this one's a big one because like time, so think about space. Now, we're talking
You're just-
about space in between, like space, like it's the same thing. Because again, because those clocks, well, it's gravity has everything to do with it, but space-time, really, if you could look at the universe, it's really like I've heard it say, it's like the best way you could describe it, it's like if you took a big thing of jello, that's space. And then if you put like a marble in it, that's the earth, and it bends time and space because it's heavy and it's pulling down on the jello. Do you know what I mean? The fabric of the cosmos, it's like it's thick. Like the universe is full. It's the gravitational pulls. And they have things like, and we're talking like I looked it up, so Einstein thought there's going to be these ripples where if there's a change in, like if a black hole happens or if a star bursts, then it's going to ripple through the space-time and it's going to affect us. And they discovered that in 2015. No, yeah, 2015, they actually were able to measure it and conclude what he said was true, which was 110 years later after he imagined it in his head. Just imagined that's the way it's got to be. So the
So
guy,
I think that's so cool. And I would have to say that somebody believed him,
yeah,
right? At some point, because if it's just a thought in his head, he has nothing to do about it. Somebody had to say, I believe you.
yeah.
And that kind of made it real.
Well, he won the Nobel Prize for it. So a lot of people believe, but
But you know what
but
I'm saying? Like
amazing. Oh,
someone could have said,
totally.
like, you're an idiot. And
Yes.
then it would have gone
Well,
nowhere.
100 years, how many years? No, probably centuries later before, you know, um, Galileo was put to death because he said that the Earth was not the center of the universe.
Right.
He didn't have proof of it. Somewhere he knew, and he was put to death because it was like, no, not going to happen. You're no way, because the Earth needed to be the center of the universe, not the sun, because that's the beliefs they had. And so he
Right.
was literally put to death for that. So yeah, you're right. It doesn't work unless somebody believes you. Like it needs to be. That's so true. That is so true. And that's part of the oneness, actually. You know what I mean? We need
Yeah.
more than ourselves, to have these things come true. But it's kind of crazy. It's just time, but think about this. So all of that relativity is fine, but think about this. Let's say you have 1 hour um, where you have a headache, right? You have a headache and a stomach ache. Let's say you have the neurovirus,
Yeah, there you go.
which one of us may have had that this week. And you're going to have that for an hour. Yeah, you're going to have that for an hour. That's a long hour.
Yeah.
But let's say you have an hour before, you know, an hour to be with your loved ones. That's going to be short.
Hmm.
So like you say, it's completely relative to your own being. That's how powerful of an entity you are in the universe, is that time literally is relative to what's going on inside of you.
I
Like,
like thinking of it that way. I like thinking of it as it's not necessarily measurable in a way that would be the same, but it's because of how you experienced it that makes it so,
hmm
right?
right. Yeah, that's a creator.
Hmm.
That's a powerful creator. Like that's a powerful person that can have, I mean, if we were to give somebody else that power, we'd be like, that's pretty powerful. You got it. You've
Hmm.
already got it. You don't have to learn it. You don't have to go there. Like it's there. It's here.
Right.
So some of the quotes from the book he that talked about time is, he says in the book, this matches what we were just talking about, you're where time comes from. And it's true. Like we are in a relationship with time, and our beliefs about time affect it a ton.
Yeah. Like
One
he
of
said, watching how you're talking about time to know how you're feeling
Mhm.
about it. And if you find yourself saying like, I never have enough time or time got short,
Yeah.
then you're kind of at time's mercy, right?
When someone says, one of the biggest things that come out when someone's late all the time, that's a trauma response. That is
Hmm.
a trauma response. And sometimes it can even be, like sometimes it can be a birth thing. Sometimes, we were late sometimes that's a birthing process. Sometimes we were,
Seriously?
yeah,
That's
like
woo. That's woo right there.
that's true. Yeah. So it's like I was late, like they weren't born late. And so same can be with born fast. I mean, my Hazel was 2 weeks early. She's the only kid that
Wow.
came on her own, and that girl doesn't stop. And so that those things are kind of related. In fact, I heard that would you consider yourself a night person? Do you
Yes.
like okay. So they say you'll usually get kind of a burst of energy at the time you were born, like around the time you were born. That, like so if you were born in the middle of the night, you're usually going to be like a night person. And I know that's true
Oh.
for my kids.
So that's why you're a day person. You were born in the day.
Yeah, I was born in the day, not the early morning. I'm not an early morning girl. But it's like my husband, we were born on the same day, remember? He was born
Yeah.
early morning. He is an early morning dude. Early morning.
Now I
Like
want to
he
go look at
just
everybody's birth certificates. I'm going to go look and see.
see where
I
they're
can't
at.
remember very well. That's not my zone of genius, is remembering dates and times. I
Right,
know.
right, right, right. That might not need to be. Yeah, because you're artistic. You're not
Yeah.
numbery.
No, I'm not numbery.
That's fine.
I was raised by a numbery person, so I still like them, but
Right, right, right.
yeah.
That gets a little tricky there too. I totally get it. I'm raised by an arty person, and I'm like, I don't even, I don't know how to do
You
that
have it
part.
in you.
I'm working on it. Okay, when you embrace Einstein time, you realize that you are the source of time. Time comes from you, and you can make as much of it as you need. Now, this is woo, but I'm going to tell you about a little experiment I did a few years ago.
All right.
Now, I'm telling you, this isn't the way I live my life 100% of the time, but I was experimenting on this idea a while
Okay.
ago. I don't know where I heard about, but this is
I'm so excited.
yeah, I just felt like I'm like, and I kept saying to myself, there is enough time. I have enough time. I would say that to myself a lot. And one of the things that I did was I decided I was going to have an experiment where I was going to experience. They had just opened the road. Do you remember Layton Parkway when they opened up that
Hmm.
whole Layton Parkway? And it was like this whole new, like it changed our whole way of getting home, because it was new off ramp and on ramps onto the freeway, and there was several lights to get through. It became the new light, and it kind of just happened at that time. And so I said, I want to experience more time, so I want more green lights on
Okay.
this road, like because this was kind of the road to get me wherever I needed to go. Like this was
Yeah.
like the center. And I was amazed at the green lights. Like it blew my mind, the green lights that would happen for me. Like
Hmm.
I played in that. And then I think I might have hit an upper limit problem like, well, I can't have every green light. But
Right.
for time, I mean, for a time, it did like for like months. It was kind of crazy that I would have green lights, like it was green lights. And I remember even we were running late, and I had to take my son. He was going to get his wisdom teeth out, and we were so late. And and I said, okay, we're going to practice this time thing. I am not going to look at the clock, and I'm just going to believe that we can get there on time. And we did. We did. It was crazy.
Wow.
It was crazy.
I think we should do more experiments like that. Like
Yeah.
just being willing to just embrace the woo
Yep.
and yeah, the experimenting idea is genius.
Yeah,
Love it.
that's what Einstein, like, I think I was even doing things on learning about Einstein, and I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then it's like, oh, it didn't work that time. But then we bring up another aspect to this upper limit, because if I go into something's wrong with me, we know that's an upper limit because that's not true. We know
Right.
that's not true. So if the experiment doesn't work, how can we separate ourselves from making that be about who we are or our worth? That's a great experiment. It's like if it doesn't work, then we don't, then how does that feel? Oh, I don't like it. I'm going there. I'm feeling it. It's like, okay, right. There it is. We can feel it. But it's okay. It's maybe not okay. Um, then at least we're seeing it. We're living that. And what does that feel like? And even if it's like the truth is, I know that I'm this true self, this amazing, what did they call it? What did he call it? The unique self. It's true. I mean, everybody is unique. There, we don't even have the same fingerprints, right? Like,
Right.
we are unique. That is true. I think we could feel that truth. Like, am I completely unique? Yes.
Mm.
Is that of value? There we might get into our measuring stick. But if we can push that measurement and push that measurement until all of a sudden there isn't a comparison anymore. There's no ruler there. It just is. It's more in the abundant. It's more just, yes, I am I am this self that is unique, and my expression is, it's like, is valuable. It doesn't have to be more valuable or less valuable. It's there, those two that doesn't need to happen. Like
Yeah.
too much of the value we put into.
So does this relate to it? Because this was a really interesting, it was very short when he talked about it in the book, and I've been pondering it, and I'm still having a hard time making sense of it. So it just talked about asking yourself a question to generate abundance of time. You have to ask yourself, where in my life am I not taking full ownership? Do you remember that part?
Mm-hmm.
Or what am I trying to disown? And I thought that that was a really key part, but he didn't spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
So he said the answer is always blindingly obvious. I was like, I tried to ask myself that. It was not obvious to me. And he
Blindingly
said,
obvious.
but we can't see it until we get humble enough to
Mm.
ask the question. But he said stress and conflict are caused by resisting acceptance and ownership. If there's
Mhm.
any part of ourselves that we're not fully willing to accept, we will experience oh my gosh, stress or friction in that area.
Mm. Well, I'm
So,
going to bring in
yeah.
something that Katie said.
Okay.
As she talked about, so there was one word in there, responsibility. So we have to take ownership or responsibility,
Okay.
But part of, I like her definition of responsibility is our ability to respond.
Okay.
And so I'm not, what I'm saying is let's say there's a place to get to, which is our zone of genius. Okay, there's our zone of genius. And if we're not there yet, we need to take responsibility for that. But it's our ability to respond. So it's like, at this point, I'm not quite there yet. My ability isn't such that I can respond in my zone of genius.
Okay.
And that just changes it a little bit. So it's not like responsibility as in, you've got to say, you've got to take it and it's your fault.
Shame on you for not doing it. Right.
Right, right. But when we, and this goes into the thing, when we go into ownership, I mean, how close is ownership to oneness? I mean, you know what I mean? It's like we're going to that oneness where when we own all of who we are, then we're allowed to let everyone else own whoever they are. And then we become this whole oneness that we can give and receive from. And we give our part and they give their part, and people have this zone of genius and people have this zone of genius, and it adds to the whole instead of competing. And maybe two people have the same zone of genius, but they do it differently because they have that self. They're expressing it in their own unique way. So it's adding to this whole that is like can't do without it, right?
Mhm.
Like it can't do without it. Well, if it's easy to see it for all those people out there, but it doesn't work until we step in and be ourselves and let that ourselves be part of that oneness. Let ourselves be, and that is, I mean, that we're right back to the journey of that, the journey through to the zone of genius is through the upper limit.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
past the upper limit. And everybody, like when I said, he's like, nobody gets out of, from his point of view, nobody gets out of having an upper limit. Like that's the price to pay or something. I don't
The
know,
hero's
but
journey. We're all on our own hero's
a
journey.
hero's
Yep.
journey. Yep. Right. And who is the hero? Like that's the thing. It's like it's a heroic journey. It really, really is. And the heroic part of it is claiming this 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 aspect of who you are, this greatness, um, this amazingness that you are. That's the journey.
Yeah.
And once you get there, then the things come in. It's so programmed that it's a thing or an amount of money or a status or a title. Like
Or
we're
being.
very programmed
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, very programmed. And that's the deprogramming because and that's why it's so wild to go into that Einstein time because it's not even it's on different levels, at different parts that exist in our not even just our universe, but our solar system, the physics that exist are totally woo-woo. So
Mm-hmm.
let's use them. Like,
Yeah.
let's use those keys. And I loved that this book kind of gave us permission to kind of go there into those woo-woo places and make me feel all warm and yummy inside.
It's a great book. I'm so glad that you introduced me to it. I'm so glad that I read it more than once too. So
Yeah, sometimes you need it. Yeah, it was great the second time. I learned so much more.
When most people are asked what they want, they will answer, I want to be happy. But happy takes practice. And that's what the Wholeness Library is all about. So check it out free at thewholenessnetwork.com.
Find out how to connect with nature as a powerful source that supports health and well-being. I'm Dina Salisi, and on my podcast, Your Healing Garden, I go on location to talk with artists, authors, healers, teachers, and much more to explore how nature supports us in creating healthy, vibrant lives. Join me on the mindbodyspirit.fm podcast network or wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you have an online course or an event or a book you'd like to promote? Then you're in the right place. You can advertise right here on mindbodyspirit.fm, the podcast network. Our engaged podcast listeners would love to hear from you. Contact info at mindbodyspirit.fm to ask about podcast advertising. It works.